Welcome to Murder and Everything Else. My name is Joy.
And my name is Cheryl. Joy and I are two very old friends that love to talk about murder and everything else.
Are you on social media, Cheryl?
No, I am not.
Okay, I know that social media has a lot of stuff that worries people or concerns people or that people don't like. Starting with the names and the personalities of the people who run them. But I have to say that I found something positive and fun on social media, and that is there's this uh, kind of a date activity that you can do with couples or with friends where you get canvases and you sit across from, like, say, your spouse or your date or your friend. So there has to be an even number of people, and then you paint that person. You don't draw, you just paint them. You
Hmm.
freelance paint them the way that you see them sitting across from you. And then at the end, you turn the canvases around and reveal. And you can either record it because it's really funny, or you can just take pictures. And so we got together with our friends, Chris and Dorian, last night, and we did that. And I have to tell you, Cheryl, first of all, painting someone is so difficult, because
Oh, yeah.
there are things like shading and like noses, so hard to paint noses and lips.
Hmm.
I thought that eyes would be hard. It's actually the eyes are not the hardest part. Um, to me, the nose, because there's the nostrils, but there's also the shading around the nose, and then also the lips, because we all know how to draw like those crazy big red lips, like on lip smackers or whatever. But the reality is everyone has different shaped and sized and thickness or thinness of lip.
Hmm.
So anyway, it was really, really funny. And I'm actually going to post the painting that my husband made of me on our Instagram just so everybody can check it out. But it was hilarious. He gave me these little chiclet teeth that look like little pieces of white gum. So funny. I laughed so hard I almost peed my pants.
Well, you guys, she sent it to me and she sent the one she did of her husband. And I have to say, I was actually pretty impressed. I honestly would not have done as good a job as you guys did. So
Well, it's funny.
hats
I'm
off to you.
I'm not an artist and I can only draw like stick people. But so I was actually kind of surprised at how well they came out too. But
Hmm.
anyway, that was
Sounds like fun.
it was so much fun. So if any of you out there are looking for a fun activity to do in a group setting or on a date or with a spouse or with a partner, you should try this. It's very inexpensive. And you could even use like crayons or markers or whatever. You don't even have
Right?
to use Sharpies. You don't
Yeah.
have to use paints, but so fun. The cool thing about paints is you can blend different colors to get different desired like skin shades and things like that. Anyway,
Hmm.
um, I have an update about the three new countries we added last week. I talked about it briefly. What else did we add? Oh, we added Sweden, we added New Zealand, and we added Mexico last week. But I was telling my husband about it, and he pointed out that people could be logging in with VPN to listen to us, which could skew the data on where people are listening to us from. So thanks so much, babe, for pouring cold ice on my hopes and dreams.
Oh, too bad. Wah, wah.
Wah, wah. You got any updates?
I do have an update. So I asked you if you watch the Super Bowl halftime show because I don't watch, I'm not into football, but I do watch the halftime show. So, Kendrick Lamar was
Yeah.
headlining it, and there's been a lot said after the show. As it turns out, Even the NFL has had internal discussions about the now controversial performance, at least according to a new report by the US Sun. An insider has apparently now revealed to the US Sun that the NFL did, in fact, send an apology to Lil Wayne after they decided to overlook him for what would have been a huge hometown performance, because Lil Wayne is from there. According to the US Sun, the NFL considers their decision to choose Lamar as a mistake, especially after the hip hop icon decided to use the platform to further promote his feud with fellow rapper Drake. Which, can I give my 2 cents?
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
I-
And then I'm going to give mine.
okay, I don't listen to Kendrick Lamar. I love rap. I just have never been into him. But I have to sheepishly admit, I'm one of these women that Chris Rock made a joke about in one of his comedy specials, that he goes, you know, those women that they're at the club and they're like getting down to the song only because of the beat, but the lyrics are like, to the window, to the wall, till the sweat drips off my balls. And he's like, they have no idea what the lyrics are, but the beat is good. Well, that's what I was like during the Super Bowl. I was like, oh wow, I really like this hook. I really like this beat. I could not understand a word of what he was saying. I felt so old. I texted one of my friends about it. The next day she sends me this video of someone who filmed, well, with the camera, uh their grandpa or their father or whatever, this older man, and his mouth is slightly hanging open as he's watching the halftime show. And you can tell he is just he is just either like mesmerized or doesn't know what to think. Anyway, they put a caption on the bottom that said, well, he can just read the subtitles, because I couldn't understand. But since then I have gone and looked up the lyrics and listened to it, and I actually really like his stuff. But that being said, I do think that his performance was focused on dissing Drake, and I felt like that was not the appropriate place to do it. I feel like the Super Bowl is like a celebration of this big sports event, and families are watching it. So I think that has to be kept in mind. Like
Well, you
my
do
favorite Super
realize
Bowl.
you do realize that the song Not Like Us is a diss track. Like it was made as a diss track. It is a
I get
super popular song, whether or not
Yeah.
it had, like Drake also released diss tracks that called out Kendrick Lamar and made reference to him, like beating up his girlfriend, for example, or wife. And so
Okay,
I'm just saying, if Drake's song had won a award or been considered, if he'd been considered for it, he probably would have performed his diss track.
I'm not saying I don't like the song. I just feel like, was it the right platform? I'm not so sure. Like I like shows like Bruno Mars did. That's one of my favorite Super Bowl. That guy is so talented when it starts off with him drumming. Just for entertainment like that. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
I don't know. You guys write in and tell us what you think.
Well, I
Um,
don't I don't know if I talked about this, but I went to go get my hair cut on the Monday after Super Bowl Sunday. And there was a full-grown man sitting there getting his hair cut, and he and the lady cutting his hair were just trashing Taylor Swift in this hair salon. And I was so blown away that a grown ass man, who, by the way, this guy looked like he was in his 50s. And this lady, I'm sure, is in her 40s, maybe early 50s. I was blown away that they would stand there and just with so little regard feel comfortable trashing a woman in her 30s that they don't know anything about, that they've never met. I thought it was so interesting how comfortable. And I wanted to say, wow, she is somebody's daughter. She's somebody's girlfriend. She's a public figure. You don't know this person. You can have an opinion on her music, an opinion on the clothing she wears and who she chooses to date. But they were talking about her like they knew her from like church. And it just
mhm.
left such a sour taste in my mouth. I got to tell you, to this hair place that rhymes with brips. If you guys feel comfortable like having those kind of conversations, like I might have to take my $18 haircut and go somewhere else. So there.
Shut them down.
Yeah.
Shut them down. Well, unfortunately, when you're a public figure, when you're a celebrity, you kind of open yourself up for that kind of stuff, unfortunately.
It's true. And in the court of public opinion, everyone has an opinion.
Correct.
Well, rolling on to shout outs. Cheryl, I have two shout outs. I'll make them quick because, we got to keep tabs on what's happening for Elena.
Yep.
I first have to give my car repair place a shout out. They replaced my brakes for free. J&W Automotive. You guys are rock stars. I went in there. My car was shimmying when I would hit the brakes. The rotors were worn. They were still under warranty. So I got a free set of brakes and rotors. And you guys, they're quick. I can sit there in a warm waiting room while they do this. They have a charging station. I can charge my phone. I can have a nice beverage. It's great. And then the other shout out I have is I want to say thank you to all of our listeners out there. And I want to just remind you, hey, tell a friend, tell a family member, tell a coworker about this podcast. Yeah, we want to just see if we can grow it even more than we have. So tell a friend about it. Post a message on Reddit. Go like and comment on our TikToks, our Instagrams, or our Blue Skies, or anything you find out there on our socials, because we would love to grow this podcast and have a few more listeners. How about you,
Yeah.
Cheryl? You got any shout outs?
Well, every once in a while I have to recommend a movie or shout out a movie. It's so old, but and sometimes it's a throwback, and this one's a throwback. So I told you this morning that I felt like watching Lars and the Real Girl starring Ryan Gosling, and it's such a great movie. It came out in 2007, and it's just if you don't know what it's about Ryan Gosling, and he gets a life-size doll, a sex doll. I guess the PC word is a love doll, but
A CPR doll.
a what?
A CPR doll.
Is that what it's called? Yeah, no. And she's anatomically correct, and but it's not like that. He treats her like his
That
girlfriend.
you know of.
Right. He treats her like his girlfriend, and it's very sweet and very sad, and then very triumphant movie. So I recommend it if you haven't seen it. It's a great, great movie.
It's a
Lars
great
and the Real
movie.
Girl.
I love
Yeah.
that movie. So good.
Hmm.
Well, guys, if you were here last week and you started out on our OJ, Nicole, and Ron adventure, we are back with week 2 of OJ, Nicole, and Ron. So I'm going to turn it over to Cheryl. I'm just here to crack jokes and to ask stupid questions.
Thank you, Joy. So we left off. I'm going to get right into this. We left off last week with OJ being arrested at his home after that 2-hour slow speed chase. So now on June 20th, 1994, the murders happened on the 13th. So now it's June 20th. OJ appears at his arraignment, and he looks like he's medicated. He's got half-lidded eyes. He's just like barely a whisper, and he pleads not guilty. So Robert Shapiro asks for a speedy trial, and this turns out to be a brilliant strategy because it forces the prosecution to rush a case that had copious amounts of evidence. It's sort of like the Brian Koberger case. they might have done well to go, have a speedy trial, but they decided not to. So now it gives the prosecution more time to go through all that evidence. But anyway,
Mhm.
Shapiro was known, as I had mentioned last time, Shapiro was known as more of a celebrity lawyer and did not have experience trying murder cases. However, Johnny Cochran, who I'm sure you all have heard his name, if not, you're going to hear it now. Johnny Cochran was a trial attorney and he was brought onto the defense team. Cochran was a well-respected civil rights attorney, and it was well known that OJ was not connected to the Black community, and Johnny Cochran was very much a part of the community. So, for example, after he turned himself in at his house after the slow speed chase, and they were taking him to jail, and they were driving out of his driveway, he commented, because you have to picture, there are people all over the Bundy house where Nicole and Ron were killed, and at the Rockingham house, because that's where OJ is. And it's all over the news. So there's all these people all over, right? I explained they were on the
Mhm.
streets and in the overpass, the freeway overpasses. And so they're all there, right? When he's being driven out of his house. And he comments, "What are all these N words doing in Brentwood?" So the
Oh,
cops were pretty shocked that he would say something like that out loud. But anyway, Cochran provided the kind of respect that OJ could never have gotten himself. So OJ had the money talks, to create what was called the dream team of lawyers: F. Lee Bailey, Alan Dershowitz, and DNA experts Barry Scheck and Peter Neufeld. And if you follow true crime, you know these names. These are big hitters.
yeah.
And another person who was part of his defense team was his good friend Robert Kardashian. Yes, of the
Mhm.
Kardashians, keeping up with the Kardashians. So he was on the team. On the prosecution team would be Marsha Clark and Chris Darden. So I'm going to go through highlights of a very
So the
racial.
prosecution team is the team that is defending uh
No, they're prosecuting him.
oh, their process, so they're for the state. Because
Right.
this was because it was a homicide, it was a criminal investigation. So it was the state versus OJ Simpson.
OJ, correct. So
Okay.
yes. So Marsha Clark and Chris Darden are prosecuting him.
Okay.
So this is the highlights from what was known as a racially charged trial. So the potential jurors were given a 79-page questionnaire. I don't know what the normal page questionnaire is like, but that seems like a lot. The defense on this documentary, a Netflix documentary, they were saying that they felt that Black women, because you're strategizing during voir dire and during the jury selection process, and you're trying to figure out what, racially and maybe economically or whatever, what
Mhm.
juror is going to do well for your case. And so the defense felt that Black women would actually be their strongest jurors because Nicole was white. Just keeping it real. Um,
Interesting.
and then Marsha Clark was known to have done well in the past with Black female jurors. And despite the racial aspects of this case, because she might have wanted to rethink that, but because she had done well in other cases, she didn't do any different picking the jurors for this case. So the jury consisted of 6 Black females, 2 Black males, 1 white female, 1 Hispanic male, 1 mixed female, and 1 mixed male. So half of the jury was Black females, which was what the defense wanted.
And
So
also,
Johnny,
wasn't the judge Japanese American?
yeah, Judge Lance Ito. Remember the dancing judges? Like he was on SNL, or they made a spoof on him, and they
Yeah.
had all these. Yeah, it was just a circus. So because Johnny Cochran had so much experience and he was well respected, he became the lead defense attorney, and Robert Shapiro had to take a back seat. And there was so much evidence. It's like you said in the first episode, it's like, what's the problem? I mean, there seems like there's like people have been put away on half that evidence. And
Right.
Robert Shapiro, I had mentioned he was known for cutting deals. So he wanted to make a deal right away. And Johnny Cochran felt that They could fight each piece of evidence. So the trial began on January 24th, 1995 at the Los Angeles Superior Court
Wow.
and lasted for 8.5 months.
That's crazy.
And the jurors were sequestered, you
What does
guys.
that mean?
That means that you are put up in a hotel. You cannot watch any news. You cannot, I think if they were given a newspaper, it was redacted. They could not
Wait,
see their
what if they
family.
had families?
That's you gotta get somebody to take care of them.
Oh
They
my God, what
literally,
a nightmare.
I mean, to me, it's like
Your dream,
sequestration.
it's your dream scenario, huh?
No,
Do
it's
they get
not.
paid, Cheryl? How do
I
they
didn't
make money?
know. It's probably your usual juror fee, which is what, I don't know, $15 a day or something
Oh my
ridiculous.
God.
No, I don't actually know. But no, they were not sequestered means sequestered. You're basically a prisoner of sorts. You cannot leave, you
What a
cannot be
nightmare.
unattended to. Yeah, they couldn't go home. They couldn't speak to their family. They are sequestered. 8.5 months, might as well have been a year. You know what I mean? Like it
Yeah.
was incredible. So the prosecution's case was that OJ was not going to let Nicole go. This was a case of domestic violence that led to murder. And there are stories of OJ stalking Nicole, looking through her window, watching her have sex with her
God.
boyfriend. So there are a lot of people that testified, to this. And she and family had. So what happened earlier on the day of the murders was that Nicole and family had attended a recital for one of her kids earlier in the day. And OJ was there as well, but he did not sit with them. And then later on, Nicole and her family went to Mezzaluna restaurant where Ron Goldman worked. They went there for dinner after the recital, and they made it clear to OJ that he was not invited. Because remember, Nicole filed for divorce, and then she tried to reconcile and this and that. And then this was when she put her foot down and she did not want to be with him anymore. So at the restaurant, Nicole had left her prescription glasses, and Ron offered to take it to Nicole's residence. Remember the envelope that was found between their
Mhm.
bodies, and it had
Yep.
the prescription glasses in there. And Cato is on the documentary saying that OJ had commented to him that he couldn't believe the dress Nicole was wearing and that it was inappropriate for a woman of her age to be wearing. And she was wearing that little black halter dress when she was killed. So when the Browns are first notified of the murders, Nicole's sister Denise is screaming, "It's OJ! It's OJ! I knew he was going to do it." Like her family immediately looked at him because of the domestic violence.
Interesting.
So to go back a little bit to talk about the domestic violence, and I had talked about how Furman was familiar with Nicole and OJ because he had been called to some, incidences of domestic violence. Back in 1985, Detective Mark Furman had gone to Nicole's residence after 911 call, and when he got there, Nicole was hiding in the bushes. She was naked, and OJ was standing there with a baseball bat in his hand, and Nicole's windshield had been bashed in, and OJ's face was full of rage, Furman says. And Furman says he asked Nicole if she wanted to make a report because that's the only way he can do anything. And she tells him she does not want to and that it's fine. And Furman says he'll always remember saying to her, "It's your life."
Oh, that's
On
terrible.
Yeah, and he says he'll never forget it. So on the night of October 25th, 1993, Nicole made two calls after OJ, in a rage, arrived at her house and broke down her back door. And this call was
God.
played in court. You can hear it on the internet. Nicole is crying, and she can be heard pleading with the dispatchers to send authorities to her home. And she's telling them she's worried because he's going to beat the shit out of me. And you can hear him screaming in the background. And she's trying to placate him
Wow.
and tell him to calm down. The kids are upstairs. I don't want them to wake up. And the dispatcher asks her, "Is he threatening you?" And she says, he's fucking going nuts. And that's where you can hear him in the background. And then the
Guys, I know
dispatcher.
we've talked about this in the past before. I'm not joking around when I say this, but being in love with somebody does not mean like if there's pain or hurt, that's not love. Okay?
Right.
And I mean, I don't mean just physical hurt. Like if somebody treats you like I think a lot of times young people, especially young men and women, think that if there's a lot of tears and a lot of volatility, it means that they're really in love. That's not love. That's dysfunction. That's crazy. You need to get out of there.
Yeah, don't confuse passion for
Yeah,
violence,
exactly.
Um, yeah, and this is actually Nicole is living at the Bundy address when this happens in 1993. So she has separated from him and he has been spying on her and he just can't let her go. Um, so
Well,
the
it
dispatch
feels like he owns her. It's
right,
not just that he can't let her go, nobody else gets to have her either.
right, right. So the dispatcher asked Nicole if similar incidents have happened in the past, and Nicole says many times, and she says he's going to kill me, he's going to kill me. And the police report, that's what the police report quotes, that she says he's going to kill me, he's going to kill me. And then Nicole ran crying towards the officers upon their arrival, and she kept saying, "You never do anything about him. You talk to him and then you leave." So the autopsy reports for Nicole Brown Simpson and Ronald Goldman provided detailed insight into their deaths. Nicole had been stabbed multiple times in the head and neck. The most severe wound was a deep, gaping cut across her throat that was determined to be the fatal injury. This wound was so severe that it almost decapitated her.
Oh
She
my
also had
God.
several she also had several defense wounds on her hands, indicating that she had tried to fend off her attacker. There were also blunt force injuries to her head, suggesting she had been struck multiple times before or during the stabbing. And they say when it's like a very gruesome attack like this,
Right.
there's a lot of rage behind it, right? I mean, that sounds very rageful.
Hmm.
Um, Ron Goldman also suffered multiple stab wounds, with the majority being in his neck, chest, and abdomen. He had numerous defensive wounds on his hands and arms, showing that he had also fought against his attacker. The autopsy revealed that Ron had been stabbed at least 25 times, with many of the wounds penetrating vital organs and causing significant internal bleeding.
Wow.
So, this is what the theory is, and the main theory that's out there is that OJ showed up at Nicole's place on Bundy Drive, and she answers the door. He attacks her, probably the blunt force trauma that knocks her out. And then Ron comes upon the scene, and it's possibly when we hear that one witness saying, "I heard a young male voice going, 'Hey, hey, hey.'" So just piecing it together, it was probably Ron coming upon OJ attacking Nicole, and then of course OJ attacks him, kills him, and then OJ goes back and finishes Nicole off. So that's what
Oh my God.
many of the theories are. The defense's case was that law enforcement didn't look at any other suspect. The defense also claimed that evidence had been planted or compromised. They relied on the jury's possible distrust of the police. They also tried to muddy the water, saying that this could have been drug related murders. They also downplayed the domestic violence and said it had nothing to do with murder, which is either just disingenuous or you're just stupid.
Right.
We all know domestic violence can definitely lead to murder, especially when the woman is wanting to leave. So there were witnesses, like I said earlier, there were witnesses that testified to domestic abuse. Some of them are OJ's friend Ron Shipp, Nicole's family, police officers. Nicole had called 911 8 times for domestic
Oh my
violence.
God.
OJ had been prosecuted and pleaded guilty for domestic violence, and there's probably many more instances that were not documented. She didn't call every single time.
Right.
And heartbreakingly, Nicole had told one of her sisters, that OJ was going to kill her and get away with it. So I want to talk real briefly about Ron Shipp, one of OJ's friends. He's been in probably almost every documentary or special, and I always feel so bad for him. He was actually a very longtime friend of OJ's.
Excuse me.
He's, bless you, he's a retired LAPD officer, and he never believed OJ was his good friend. He never believed that OJ would be capable of murdering Nicole. But after the
So
murders,
interesting.
but after the murders, Ron went and visited OJ, and he noticed the cut on OJ's left finger, and he asks him about it, and OJ tells him he cut it getting his cell phone out of the car. And shortly after that, he overhears someone else asking OJ about his finger, and OJ tells them he cut it on a glass in Chicago. So now Ron's spidey senses are going off, right? So
Right.
then Ron said that OJ then asked him, because Ron used to be a police officer, OJ asked him how long, it takes DNA to come back. And OJ tells Ron that he refused to take a lie detector test when he had that interrogation. And Ron asks why. And OJ said he had dreams of killing Nicole. So back in 1989, so Ron and AC Cowlings, they were friends of OJ's, but being in OJ's orbit, you are going to either hear or be witness or whatever to the abuse that Nicole went through. So back in 1989, Nicole had gone to Ron's ship and told him that OJ had hit her and she had pictures. And I think she probably went to him for help, like for him to go talk to OJ.
Mm-hmm.
So when Ron confronted OJ about the abuse, guess what he said? He said Nicole was the aggressor.
Hmm.
So by the time Ron leaves OJ's house, he knows his friend has killed Nicole. So let's go back to the trial. So Alan Park was the limo driver, and he was assigned to pick up OJ the night of the murders and take him to the airport, right? Remember, he was going to Chicago.
Right.
When Alan Park drives up, he rings the intercom to the house, but no one's answering. And while he's waiting for an answer, Cato had come out. Remember, Cato was in his place and he hears the banging on his wall, and he comes out. Cato sees the limo driver and he lets him into the gate. And Cato asks him, "Did you feel that earthquake?" And then Alan was like, "No," because it wasn't an earthquake, right? So at that time, Alan said he saw a figure going into the house, a 6-foot black male, and he identified OJ in court. He buzzes the intercom a few more times. Oh, I'm sorry, Cato
Huh.
hadn't let him in yet. Cato had not let him in yet. He buzzes the intercom a few more times, and then finally, OJ answers and says he was in the shower and had overslept. So now Cato and Alan are out by the limo, and Cato helps put OJ's luggage in the trunk of the limo, and there's a small duffel bag that OJ does not want Cato to touch. So OJ handles this bag himself. So now Alan drives OJ to the airport and drops him off at the American Airlines terminal for the flight to Chicago. So just remember, the white Bronco is parked outside his gate, and Alan sees someone running into the house. And then shortly after that, OJ comes out and says he overslept. So Mark Furman, good old Mark Furman. Hey, so this guy
Who's Mark Furman again? He's a police officer?
he's a police officer. He was
Okay.
he was a detective. He was the first detective on the
Okay.
scene. He's the one that found the glove behind Cato's bungalow.
Okay.
And he does great on direct examination. But on cross examination, F. Lee Bailey is doing the cross, and he asks Furman if he had ever used the N word. And Furman vehemently denies, no, he's never used the N word. And so F. Lee Bailey says, so if we have evidence that you said the N word, you would be lying right now. And he said, I have never said the N word. So when it's the defense's turn to present their evidence and put on their case, they call Furman back to the stand, and lo and behold, they have a tape that they play where Furman uses the N word repeatedly. I don't know how many times, so many times. And he's using it again, and then he's speaking disparagingly against Mexican people and people of color, and just
So they out him as being a racist.
Yes, and a liar, right?
Right.
And he says in trying to salvage his credibility, he says there was this woman who was writing a script and he was helping her give like the real language from the streets and how it would really be,
Yeah,
trying to
sure.
help her. Exactly. So then this was the big, big, just the nail in the coffin of this case, in my opinion. I was like, I cannot, it's just like, are you kidding? He's on the stand and he's asked under oath if he had ever falsified a police report or if he had ever planted or manufactured any evidence in this case, and he takes the fifth. He asserts his
Oh.
right to remain silent. So how does that look?
So
You're on this.
he looks guilty as hell because he should have been taking the fifth from the get-go. If he was
Yeah,
going to, but he only takes the fifth to when asked about falsifying a police report, planting
yeah,
or manufacturing evidence. I'm sorry. Like that looks super guilty.
it's so awful. As a police officer, you're asked, have you planted or manufactured any evidence? And you go, I take the fifth. I mean, there's one juror that's on this Netflix documentary that's being interviewed, and she's like, that means yes, right? If you take the fifth when someone asks if you planted, if asks you if you planted any evidence and you go and take the fifth, she's like, that's like
Yeah.
yes, in my
Yep.
opinion. So that was a disaster. And then we get to the evidence. So DNA was relatively new at the time of the trial, and mistakes were made during the evidence collection. And it was highlighted and repeated during cross examination by those DNA experts on the defense team.
Interesting.
Criminalist Dennis Fung admitted on the stand that not all correct procedures were followed, such as handling evidence without gloves. There's a picture of him. The defense attorneys bring it up. There's a picture of him handling the envelope without wearing gloves.
Okay.
And so he had to admit to that and possible cross contamination. And then Detective Lang also had to admit that he took a blanket from the house and put it over Nicole's body because the media was there and you could see her body from the walkway. So he covered it with a blanket from the house, which just makes you cringe if you know anything about forensics. I'm not an expert, but that's bad.
Right.
um, and then Ron's body had been moved close to the blanket. So there's all this possible cross contamination, right? There was a blood drop on the back gate that was collected. I remember this one. I don't know why it sticks out so much, but there was a blood drop on the back gate that was collected 2 weeks after the murders. I don't know how that's done because I don't think they had it cordoned off and had law enforcement watching the area. So they go
Right.
back and collect a sample after the crime scene was just taken, it was exposed to anyone coming in and out. And then another big deal was that Detective Van Adder had to admit on the stand that after he got OJ's blood sample at the police station when they interrogated him, he drives to the crime scene where they're getting all this evidence and he gives the blood sample to the criminalist, which just seems so weird that he didn't take it like to the lab or the police station. So
Mhm.
the defense highlights that, like, have you ever done that before, taken a blood sample from the accused to a crime scene? And he had to admit on the stand that he had never done that before. It's like, why did you do it
Oh,
now? And
right.
then the socks found at the foot of OJ's bed that had Nicole's blood on it. There was an assertion that the blood was planted after, and the prosecution said, well, it was collected later because it was hard to see by the naked eye because the socks were black. But when the jury had an opportunity to actually view the socks in court, the blood stain was clear. So it was
Wow.
just a lot of reasonable doubt, right? So Fung, the criminalist Fung, he was totally discredited and obliterated on the stand. And I don't remember this for these 30 years. I don't remember this, but in watching this documentary, After he is just annihilated on the stand and his credibility is shot to hell. Fung is a criminalist. He's for the prosecution. He was the lead in collecting all the evidence.
Mhm.
After his testimony, he got down from the stand and he crossed the courtroom and he actually went to the defense team and shook their hands. It was the
Wow.
weirdest thing. I imagine how Chris Darden and Marsha Clark felt, just like egg on their face. Our
Right.
criminalist is going
I
to shake the defense team's hand.
I have to tell you, the name Effley Bailey like rang so many bells, and I looked it up. You know that he came to first nationwide attention for his involvement in the murder trial of Sam Shepard, the surgeon accused of murdering his wife. Remember the movie The Fugitive
Fugitive.
was based
Yeah.
on that. So
Mm-hmm.
I was like, um that's
You
where
know
I
him.
had heard that. And also he was uh in the defense team for the trial of the Boston Strangler. So he was tied to a bunch of super famous cases.
Yes, he's been in the game a long time. Okay, so now we've got the criminalist, say that 10 times fast. He's pretty much discredited, and now comes the big fiasco. Next to Furman taking the fifth on the stand, Chris Darden, one of the prosecutors, asks OJ to try on the
I
gloves.
I remember this. I remember
This
reading and
is,
hearing about this.
oh my
They
God.
said it was a circus. This was when everybody called it out as just being all sensation. It's like also this is like something that's evidence.
Yeah, but well, they've taken the evidence, they've taken what they needed from it, right? They taken
I
samples
don't
of
know. It
the
just seems
the
weird.
well, and it was not a good move. It was the blunder of the century. So sorry, Chris. He seems like a very nice guy. Chris Darden asks OJ to try on the gloves, and I've heard this in many specials and documentaries that Effley Bailey actually baited him to do it. He kind of dared him to do it,
Interesting.
and Marsha Clark was not in agreement with this. And why she couldn't talk him off this ledge, I don't know. But Chris has OJ put on the gloves in front of the jury. Now, the glove has shrunk from being wet with blood, right? The
Right?
gloves, the gloves are leather. They've been wet. They are going to shrink. Also, to make matters worse, because it's evidence, they had to have OJ wear latex gloves to try them on.
Oh
How,
yeah,
how is anything going to
that's
fit if
not
you've
gonna
got
work.
latex glove and then try a leather glove on top of that, and the gloves have
Yeah.
shrunk? Okay, and then OJ had the bright idea, and I'm not being facetious, to stop taking his arthritis medication. So his fingers were swollen. So it was
Worse.
just a perfect storm, a
A
perfect
comedy of
disaster.
errors.
Correct. It was comical. So needless to say, the gloves do not fit. And OJ plays this up in front of the jury. I remember watching it live, and he's like tug, and then he uses his great acting skills from, what's the show? What was that movie again? What was it?
Naked Gun.
Making Gun.
I don't know about great acting.
I know I'm being facetious now.
Okay.
He like tugs on it. The fingers won't go down. He's like, oh, and he's making this face to the jury like, I
See?
don't know, kind of like shrugs like, oh boy, they don't fit. It was just a horrible, horrible moment. Horrible. And Chris, being interviewed in this documentary, says he feels guilty about it to this day. He feels like he let the family down, because it really was, between this and Furman, was just one of the biggest blunders of this trial, if you
Oh
ask me.
yeah.
So let's talk about the evidence that witnesses kept out of trial, because there's always that in every trial.
Yep.
So this is one of the things that was new to me um in this documentary after all these years. maybe I've just forgotten, but this was new. So in the Rockingham house, when they first went there was a cabinet found with medical supplies ripped open, and they were not collected because remember he had that injury on his
Mm-hmm.
head. In OJ's bathroom, they find a knife box on the side of the tub, not collected.
Huh.
In the laundry room, there was blood on the light switch. That was not collected.
Interesting.
In the washing machine was freshly laundered clothes. They were still damp. Those were not collected. So then you have Detective Lang and Furman in this documentary. This is the first one where I've seen they've spoken so openly about being at odds with each other. Mark
Right.
Furman and Detective Tom Lang. They're kind of blaming each other about who dropped the ball and not collecting this evidence.
Right.
So there were a couple of witnesses. If you follow this case, you will know their names. Jill Shively. She, on the night of the murders at 10:45 p.m., was driving to a market in Brentwood. And as she was approaching Bundy Drive, she encounters a white SUV running a red light. The SUV goes up on the median and then stops. She got a good look at the driver, and the driver was yelling obscenities and yelling for people to get out of his way, and she recognized him as OJ. However, what happened was she sold her story to a magazine after the murders because she needed money. And Marcia Clark was furious and told her she ruined her case. So Marcia decided not to call her as a witness, although Chris Darden is on this documentary saying, I would have still put her on. Lots of people have still told their stories. It doesn't mean that she didn't witness what it doesn't
Yeah.
mean that she didn't witness what she witnessed just because she told the magazine about it. So anyway,
Right.
she's not called to the stand. Also on the night of the murders, Skip Junis was at LAX to pick up his wife, and he's parked outside the American Airlines terminal, and he's outside by the sky cap, and a limousine pulls up, and he says he sees OJ exit the limo, and he watches OJ interact with the sky cap, but OJ does not want anyone to touch that small duffel bag, the one that he would not let KO touch.
What was in
He
it?
then well, we won't know, but he says, Skip Junis says that he saw OJ take the duffel bag to a trash can and take items out and throw them in the trash. And one of the items was long and wrapped in a cloth. And he was never called. He was told he would be called after the DNA portion of the trial, but he was never called.
Interesting.
Um, and then, of course, OJ did not testify in his own defense. And is with any trial, the judge has to ask the defendant if that was their own choice, if anybody coerced them into not, testifying, and you realize this and that, you have to make sure that the defendant does not want to testify.
Right.
So OJ stands up and says he does not want to testify, but not before pandering to the jury and and saying that I would like to, though, because I am innocent and blah, blah, blah. And he goes on and panders before them, but says, but I'm not going to testify,
Right.
So in the closing arguments from the prosecution, they asked the jury to ignore the racist cop on the case and look at the rest of the evidence. And the defense asked the jury in closing, and this is big, Johnny Cochran asks the jury to send a message to the LAPD and not let them get away with this cover up. And
Huh.
this is where Johnny Cochran's famous, infamous line of if it doesn't fit, you must acquit comes
Huh.
in. That that phrase has gone on, it's lived on in
I,
infamy.
I don't
If it
remember
doesn't,
hearing that.
you're lying.
No, I don't.
You are lying,
I
Joy.
didn't. I didn't hear it. I
Okay, are
promise.
you pulling my
No,
leg
I
like my
told you
chiropractor?
I never listened to the news back then. I never paid attention to what was happening. All I watched was David Letterman and occasionally Jay Leno. That was it.
Oh my God, you're pulling my leg. Oh,
I
in
did
your
not
words.
start listening to NPR until I was in my mid 30s, 34, 35. And the
Well,
reason I did was because I met my husband and he was a devoted NPR listener.
Oh my gosh. Well, in your words, you must have been living under a
I
rock.
was living under a rock.
My God. I mean, I'd like to, if any of you out there did have not heard that phrase, please write in Joy's
Yeah,
defense, because
please do.
that became, if it doesn't fit, he tells the jury, because of that glove blunder, if it doesn't fit, you must acquit. So everyone expects the verdict to take weeks. The lawyers go off to to the Caribbean and
Right.
they just fly out because they're exhausted. 8.5 months.
Oh yeah, it's
And they're
like
like,
that's
"Phew,
forever.
we can put our feet up for a while. It's gonna take a while for the verdict." And then after less than 4 hours, the jury
Whoa.
reaches a verdict. So there are hordes of people waiting outside the courthouse for the verdict. Police presence is beefed up in case of a guilty verdict because there's just a lot of OJ supporters out there.
Well,
And
and
that
a
one,
lot of racial tension as well.
yes,
Because remember, remember Rodney King, remember the LA riots,
yep.
remember burning all of those like Korean owned liquor stores. I mean, East LA, there were parts of LA that were literal war zones.
Oh, it on fire. And I lived there. This is what I was talking to you after we recorded the first one. Part of my interest was that I was there. I mean,
Wow.
I live so close to all of this, but you're right. The police presence had to be beefed up because Rodney King happened only a few years before that. And remember when the white cops were the trial of the cops that beat Rodney King was moved to Simi Valley because
Hmm.
of all the media coverage, and they were acquitted. And that's what, yeah, started the LA riots. And I remember it was scary. I didn't live down where the LA riots were taking place, but it was close enough. You know what I mean? It
Oh,
was
sure.
just to know that that was going on a few miles away was
Hmm.
terrifying, and it was so sad. Um, so yeah, so there's a lot of racial tension, and so the police presence is beefed up in case it's a guilty verdict. So the one juror that was on this documentary, she says that she also expected the verdict to take a long time, but the initial vote was 10-2
Was that the one
guilty.
that you said was dumb as a pile of rocks?
No, that was for the Richard Allen case. You're getting
Oh,
your cases mixed up. And I did not use those words. Hello. Nobody sue me. I did not say that. I did not say that. No, that's a different case. So she says that the initial vote was 10-2 guilty. And after a few hours of deliberating, they decided to take another vote, and it's now unanimous. She says there was reasonable doubt, and she believes Furman tainted the case.
do you
So
think that the deciding issue was not being able to put the glove on?
I think that didn't help. For my personal opinion, is Furman, and the glove was just a chaser. It was just the icing. I think
Interesting.
Furman, because half the jury, no, more than half the jury was black, and of course, like I said, you had those racial tensions from, you
Right.
know, cops treating people of color badly and beating them, doing criminal things. I mean, what they did to Rodney King was criminal.
Oh, sure.
Now this, and it's amazing that someone back in 1991 actually filmed it.
Hmm.
Um, but anyway, so I believe Furman, she's that's the one thing she said. This one juror, she said there was reasonable doubt, and that reasonable doubt could be not just Furman, but the DNA that they felt was compromised, and then the glove. The glove was just
Right.
a big fiasco. So because she said she believed that the one thing she pointed out was she believed that Furman tainted the case. That's the one thing she absolutely that's what she
Interesting.
pointed out. So after 8.5 months of testimony and a sequestered jury, on October 3rd, 1995, after less than 4 hours of deliberation, the jury finds OJ not guilty of 2 counts of murder. And I have to just add this in because it stays with me since that day. And every time I see clips of it, it kills me. Kim and Ron were very, very close, like exceptionally close. They were the only two siblings. Ron was her older brother. What stays with me is her reaction when the verdict was read. She is doubled over, grabbing her stomach. Her face is beet red. She's in tears. She looked like she couldn't breathe, like she was going to pass out. She goes from doubling over to leaning on her dad to doubling over. It is so sad. And the juror that was on this documentary says that the juror says she will never forget Kim's gut-wrenching scream when the verdict was read, and she can still hear it to this day. And she says she felt bad, but that's the verdict they came to. So do you remember this? There were groups of people shown on TV, like in bars, in churches, in wherever, like groups of people that just glued to the TV, as I was in my house in Oregon,
I
just
didn't
watching
know
the verdict.
anything about this.
Oh, it was so widely publicized. They showed, like I said, groups of people in the barbershop, the restaurant, the church, in their house. The camera crews just went and filmed all these different people and their reactions to the verdict being read. I will tell you, I cried. People,
Really?
Yeah, I did. I was so invested.
Wow.
When they read that not guilty verdict, Black people cheered. They showed people cheering, Black people cheering. And then conversely, they showed the white groups who were stunned. They were stunned and they just shook their heads. And I just want to add,
because people really loved OJ Simpson, they loved him being a football hero. Or do you think it was just staged? Like they just, were like, okay, we're gonna need a group of Black people who are willing to cheer, because like,
oh God, no, Joy. No, this was a racially divided case. This divided by race. And I think they didn't want to see another person of color being found guilty. There was so much. Nicole was white. They had recently had incidences like Rodney King, where white cops are being let off after beating him.
Yeah, that's true. I didn't think about that.
No, you have to go back and are these people actors? You need to go watch this shit.
You don't
No.
It's one of the things that I will say, especially, with the way social media is, Cheryl, come on. Everything is up for speculation.
Got it. Yeah, well, that's a very good point. These days. But if you go back and watch, this is real raw footage. And the other thing that sticks out to me is his friend Robert Kardashian is in the clip of when the verdict is being read, and you can see his face go white. He looks like he's going to be sick to his stomach because he's a friend of Nicole's too. And I think what happened, and I've heard that as the trial went on, so of course he's going to defend his friend, right? That's his friend. But as the trial went on and he heard all the evidence, I believe he knew that his friend did it and was completely shocked at the verdict. If you go watch you can see his reaction. So Robert Shapiro would later say that he did not want to play the race card, but the race card was played, and it was played from the bottom of the deck. And he is accused of the other attorneys of sour grapes because Johnny had become the lead attorney. So ironically, OJ bent over backwards. OJ bent over backwards not to live a Black life, and then he became the champion for every Black man that had ever been beaten or insulted by a cop. OJ's buddies, his golf buddies deserted him. His country club makes him feel unwelcome. He became the ultimate pariah. The most precious thing to him, his reputation, was tainted. But then the Goldmans and the Browns moved very quickly into their civil case. A criminal case means prison time.
That.
Okay. A criminal case means prison time. A civil case is monetary, but the Goldmans and Browns weren't after money. They wanted 12 people to say OJ was responsible for the murders of Nicole and Ron. So on October 23rd, 1996, the civil trial starts. The standard of proof in a criminal case is higher than in a civil case. In a criminal case, the prosecution must prove beyond a reasonable doubt that the defendant is guilty. In a civil case, the plaintiff must prove by a preponderance of the evidence that the defendant is responsible. The standard is much lower in a civil case. The trial was held in Santa Monica, California. The jury pool was made up of more whites, less black people than in the criminal jury. And the differences here from the criminal jury or the criminal trial is that Furman was kept out of the civil case. They were like, we are not touching him with a 10-foot pole.
Yeah.
The trial was not televised, and the big difference in a civil case is OJ had to testify. He has to testify in a civil case. So that's a huge.
And they didn't televise it, but did they release transcripts on a daily basis?
I am not sure. I think they might have, but I didn't follow the civil case. I didn't follow it like I followed the
Why? Why didn't you follow it?
I don't know. Maybe because it wasn't televised. I'm not sure. Yeah. But I followed everything still after that, after everything happened. But yeah, I didn't follow the civil case. But on February 4th, 1997, OJ is unanimously found guilty of causing the death of Nicole and Ron. And the Goldmans and Browns expressed their elation on TV that OJ was found liable for the murders. But Kim goes on to say that even though he was found guilty, he walked out of the same doors that they walked out of after the verdict. And she said it felt really weird. I can see that. She goes on to say the person that a jury said killed your loved one is free. And OJ went to get ice cream after he was found responsible for those murders. OJ was then sentenced to pay $33.5 million in damages, but he tells his friend he's never going to pay it, and he was able to hide his assets. So I believe that the families were able to like garnish some of the earnings he made from, that book he wrote, If I Did It. Do you remember? God, he wrote this book, Joy, that was.
Did you read it?
No, I don't want to read what he has to say. You can tell how I feel about this. And I don't have to say he allegedly killed her because he was found guilty in a civil case. I'm not going to support his book. It's going to be all BS anyway. And who goes after you get off, you found acquitted of a double murder? Why would you go write a book like that? If I did it was stupid.
I know. Sounds crazy. Sounds like the actions of a crazy person.
Yeah, or a narcissist. So after OJ is acquitted, I don't know if I ever heard this, or maybe this person never said it before. And I think he might have said he has never said this publicly before. But OJ's longtime sports agent and friend, Mike Gilbert, after OJ's acquitted, he asked OJ what really happened the night of the murders. And OJ asks Mike, what do you think happened? And Mike said, OJ, I always thought you did it. And OJ turned to him and said, if Nicole wouldn't have opened the door with the knife, she would be alive. So, Yikes. I don't think I've ever heard that before. And I can't remember if he said he's never said it publicly before, but he says it on this because, as time has gone on, people have had a chance to, if you were a friend of his, you first didn't want to believe he could do it. And then I think most people were like, okay, I think he did it. And then it was coming to terms with that, right? So to share something like that must have been really hard for him to tell the world that OJ said that. Wow. It's crazy. So then OJ moved to Florida and arrogantly flaunted his fortunes. He did not keep a low profile, just the opposite. Remember, he was drinking, going to strip clubs, photographed with groupies, doing drugs. And then on September 16, 2007, in Las Vegas, Nevada, OJ is arrested for robbery with a deadly weapon. He had been trying to take back some memorabilia that
I
belonged to him.
remember
I
this.
remember that. Yeah, from some dealers that were staying at a hotel in Vegas. One of
Yep.
the people in the room recorded the incident, and the big issue was that OJ and his friends brought guns. So on October 2nd, 2008, OJ Simpson is convicted of assault, kidnapping, and armed robbery. He is sentenced to 33 years in prison.
Whoa.
And some people say it was payback for his acquittal in the criminal case of the
Huh.
murders.
But it seems like
Um,
33 years for assault, kidnap, and armed robbery in comparison to like murdering two people and then getting off scot-free seems so crazy.
Crazy high or low?
Like crazy high. I've heard of
Well,
people who like those priests who molest like 600 children who get like 13 years, but all they do is move them to a different church.
yeah. Well, it's 33 years seemed really high for assault, kidnapping, and armed robbery, but some people say the judge was like, that's probably the most she could do. But some people say it was kind of payback
Karma.
for,
Karma was
although,
coming back to get him.
yeah, although of the 33 years, he served only 9 because when he went up in front of the parole board in 2017, they granted him parole. And
Well,
after that, he again did not keep a low profile. He went on social media and did all these crazy videos and
wasn't he living in Florida? I mean, come on. Remember what we've always said? Florida and Texas, man. Like, stay away. Like, no shade.
uh,
Everybody who knows me knows I love me some Miami. But, oof, the state of Florida, like, got some crazy shizzle going on down there.
yeah, but in their defense, he was from LA and he
Yeah,
and the
I
murders
gotta tell
happened in
you, if
California.
you live in a state where it's really hot, Arizona,
I think
Texas, Florida, get out. Something's wrong.
I think it had something happens. Yeah, for sure. It affects your
Yeah,
brain.
it addles your brain.
Well, as you guys know, OJ Simpson died at the age of 76 on April 10th, 2024 from prostate cancer. Or maybe you didn't know. Anyway,
Yeah,
he died.
and I think I told you this, that I read that everybody who went to visit him in the hospital, friends and family that were allowed to be there as like by his deathbed, had to all sign non-disclosure
I
agreements and I'm
crazy.
sorry, gag orders, because he did not want any deathbed confessions that were then leaked to the press.
Isn't that so? To me, that's telling, first of all.
Narcissistic,
Who does that, right?
right?
I mean, who is so afraid of their deathbed confessions or whatever they say as they're dying getting out? I mean, to me, that's really telling. Because
Mine,
remember,
mine'll just be like, mine'll just be like, I really loved shoes more than I admitted.
yours would be there's a pair of shoes
I never
in my
bought.
trunk, in my
I
trunk. It
have
has to
six.
be returned.
I have a storage facility that's full of shoes from floor to ceiling that no one knows about. Here's the key. I've hidden it in my rectum.
My gift to the world is that I don't want them to go unfound. I
I had
want people to wear them.
this uncomfortable hunk of metal in my asshole for the last 20 years.
You know what's ironic is that Mark Furman was convicted of perjury, right, from the criminal trial. Obviously, he lied.
Right?
Um, and the ironic part was he was the only person convicted in OJ's criminal murder case.
God.
Um, so the Nicole Brown Simpson Foundation was established in 1994 to help victims of domestic violence. The foundation was later renamed the Nicole Brown Charitable Foundation. The foundation, because I went to look to see if it's still active, and it's what I found was the foundation has not appeared on the IRS business master file for several months, which could indicate that it has ceased operations or merged with another organization. And while we're trying to bring some levity to this awful story, if you or someone you know is in a domestic violence situation, you can call the hotline at 1-800-799-SAFE, which is 7233, 1-800-799-7233, or you can text the word START, START, to 88788. So one of the things I wanted to ask you, Joy, so race played a huge part in this trial, right? Because
Right.
Rodney King's abusers, law enforcement officers were found not guilty. After
Right.
you watch that video, if you can't find someone who's in law enforcement who's supposed to be protecting, citizens, if you watch that video and you can say that was not excessive force, I don't know what you're watching. Um, but anyway, have we gotten better with race relations?
No, I don't think we have. I think in many instances we've gotten worse. Um, One thing that I will say is, the pandemic and the administration we had during the pandemic felt very comfortable on using slurs like calling it the China virus instead of calling it COVID-19 or calling it COVID SARS 19, whatever, whatever. Um, and also, you know, we saw an uptick in Asian hate crimes. We've
Yes, we
also,
did.
yeah, we've also
Awful.
seen, like with Trayvon Martin, I think we did an episode on that. And then
Mhm.
also, um, just the increase in hate speech groups, the rise of Nazism in the United States. Recently, we had a video of Elon Musk doing what can only be explained as a Nazi symbol with his hand. It resembles the Heil Hitler symbol that the Nazis used in um, the Hitler era and World War II. It's illegal
Ugh,
in Germany and parts of Europe. If you do that, you can go to jail or be prosecuted. So I will say that, like the Charlottesville, there was some Nazi protest in Charlottesville. A woman was killed. Um, we talked briefly about this kid, Kyle Rittenhouse, showing up to some Black Lives Matter protests and killing two people and injuring a third. I will say that no, I don't believe that race relations have gotten any better. Let's face
mhm.
it, the face of this nation is an immigrant face. Remember, we're all immigrants here. Unless you're a Native American or Native North American or Central American, you're an immigrant. For you and me, because we don't look white and we don't identify as white and we aren't white, it's very, very obvious that our ancestors came from somewhere else. We don't have to tell people that. We just lead by what we look like.
Right,
However, there are a lot of people here who, think that this is their God-given land and country, and it doesn't matter, that they took it by sheer force, and they're not willing to accept that they also came from immigrant groups once upon a time. So,
right,
yeah,
right.
I don't feel like race relations have gotten any better. That having been said, can it get better? Absolutely. Do we have to do everything we can to, educate ourselves and arm ourselves with friends and communities that support diversity and people of color? Absolutely. Do we have to teach our young people how to accept people regardless of what they look like, what their outer shell is? Absolutely. That includes disabled people, that includes people with learning disabilities, that includes all different kinds of people. We don't all come one color, one shape, one size, one belief, one ideology, one, variety is the spice of life. So yeah, it's my hope and dream that, someday we can sort this out. But I will say, I read somewhere that someone famous, I don't know who it was, and I'm not going to look it up, said that, this is a very fragile young democracy that we live in. And we are going through a lot of growing pains right now that other countries maybe have already gone through because they've been around a lot longer than we have. And they made the mistakes that we're making now many, many years ago. So I guess we'll see. Well, I got to tell you, this one was like the crime of the century.
Yeah, it was.
Yeah, but you know what's a bigger crime?
What's that, Joy?
That we are so out of time.
So out of time. Well, thank you for listening, everyone. And don't complicate your day. All creativity, commentary, and opinions in this podcast belong to Cheryl and Joy. Music composed and mixed by Gabe McKeon. Logo and merch managed by Cheryl Yamaguchi. Podcast editing, advertising, and social media managed by Joy McKeon. Legal representation provided by John Bojezic. Please like, subscribe, follow, and listen. You can listen to us on Spotify, Apple Podcast, Audible.com, Amazon Music, YouTube, and iHeartRadio. And remember, you can find us on Instagram and TikTok, or you can email us at murderandeverythingelse@gmail.com.
Bye, fishes.